Missy Elliott has quietly built a $50 million empire that goes far beyond music. From luxury properties and exotic cars to businesses and valuable music rights, she owns more than most fans realize. But buried inside her fortune are a few surprising assets you probably wouldn't expect Missy to own. Here's the thing about Missy Elliott's money. Most of it isn't sitting in a bank account waiting for a paycheck from streaming. It's tied up in ownership, specifically ownership of a record label. She started before most of today's biggest pop stars were even born, back in 1997, when Elliott was gearing up to release her debut album. She didn't just sign to a major label and call it a day. She launched her own imprint, the Goldmine Inc., and it went into business. The same year, her debut album Super Duper Fly made it the Goldmine Inc.'s official entrance into the music industry. That's the first thing people miss when they think about her wealth. She wasn't just an artist getting a royalty check. She was, from day one, a label owner. Goldmine wasn't a vanity name tacked onto her own records either. It became a functioning operation, home to Missy Elliott, specializing in R&B, hip-hop, and soul music. The label put out her albums, but it also gave her a vehicle to sign and develop other artists. The label's first release outside of Elliott herself came almost immediately. Super Duper Fly, produced by Timbaland, spawned 4 hit singles, including the Grammy-nominated The Rain Super Duper Fly, Sock It To Me, Beat Me 911, and Hit 'Em With Dahi. And the album featured vocals by Nicole Ray, who became Elliott's first artist for the label other than Elliott herself. So while the world was learning her name as a rapper, she was already functioning as an executive. That's a distinction that matters a lot when you start adding up where $50 million actually comes from. Now, let's talk about the other half of that money, because owning a label is one thing, but Missy Elliott's real financial backbone comes from something most fans don't even think about: the songs she wrote for other people. Before she ever dropped a solo verse under her own name, she was already in rooms writing for other acts. She earned writing credits for artists like Jodeci and Raven Simonet, laying pen to paper for other people's hits, before eventually going on to explore on her own accord. That's the piece of the puzzle that turns a rapper into a mogul. Not just recording songs, but owning a piece of songs that other people sing. The list of artists she's written or produced for reads like a who's who of R&B and pop history. She has worked across generations, and her songwriting and production credits sit right alongside her own catalog in terms of importance. Her behind-the-scenes work includes hits like So Gone by Monica and Keisha Cole's Let It Go, plus contributions ranging from Beyoncé's Signs to Jasmine Sullivan's Need You Bad. From Beyoncé's Signs to Jasmine Sullivan's Need You Bad, she has been the pulse behind some of R&B's most timeless hits. Every single one of those placements means publishing royalties. Every stream, every sync license, every radio spin generates money that lands back with her, separate from anything she does as a performer. And then there's Aaliyah. Elliott's fingerprints are all over the late singer's catalog, a body of work that has only become more valuable as time passes and as new deals get made around it. She's also written and produced for a run of A-list names spanning decades: Whitney Houston, Beyoncé, and beyond, writing and producing songs for a variety of artists, including Aaliyah, Whitney Houston, and Beyoncé, further solidifying her influence in the music industry. That kind of spread one hand in R&B's biggest icons across 3 decades is exactly why her income doesn't dry up when she's not touring or dropping new albums herself. This brings us to something that happened very recently and that most casual fans have no idea about. The value of the songs Elliott's name is attached to just got a very public price tag put on it, in the biggest way possible. A brand new publishing company called Legacy Publishing launched after acquiring a massive catalog tied to Blackground and Black Fountain Publishing. And Missy Elliott's work is right at the center of it. Legacy Publishing launched under Chaka Zulu and Partners after acquiring the Blackground, Black Fountain catalog, featuring Aaliyah, Missy Elliott. This isn't some small boutique deal either. It's a serious operation with serious backing, and it tells you everything about how much her catalog is worth on paper. Right now, in the current market, the scale of that catalog is enormous. It's not just a handful of songs, it's more than 800 songs. And the catalog houses key recordings by Aaliyah, Missy Elliott, and Timbaland, plus hit collaborations featuring Jay-Z, Drake, Lil Wayne, and Nas, among others. Think about what that means. Every time a new artist samples an old Aaliyah record or flips a Timbaland beat that Elliott had a hand in, that catalog generates income, and Legacy is actively working it, not just sitting on it. The company has already put 15 new songs out, built on samples from that catalog. And those songs alone have racked up over 700 million streams. Since acquiring the catalog, Legacy says it has released 15 new songs, featuring samples from it, generating more than 726 million streams on Spotify. That number is worth sitting with for a second. 726 million streams from just 15 new songs built on old bones. Bones that include work Elliott had her hands in decades ago. Those new tracks aren't obscure either. Examples include big-name collaborations: CN Tower by Part Next Door and Drake, Wassup by Young Miko, Somebody by Lotto, JT Coming by JT, Open Invite by Tiana Taylor and Kaytranada, and All the Signs by Don Toliver. So when people say Missy Elliott's music never left the culture, this is the proof. It's not a compliment, it's a revenue stream, active, working, and growing in 2026. The company behind the deal isn't shy about what it's trying to do with these old songs either. Their stated goal is to squeeze new value out of catalogs that already made history once and do it again. According to the announcement, Legacy Publishing wants to reinvigorate these works through strategic partnerships, innovative capital structures, and proactive asset management. Translation: they bought a gold mine, quite literally connected to Missy Elliott's own label name, and they intend to keep mining it for years. One of the executives behind the deal made a point that explains exactly why catalogs like this get bought and sold for these kinds of numbers in the first place. It's not sentimental, it's business. Boykai Cummings, who founded CIH Group and an asset management software platform called Octave AI, put it plainly when he said copyright owners today are looking for financial flexibility, paired with real partnership, and that high-quality assets need the right structure to move into their next chapter. The financial terms of the purchase weren't made public. Financial details about the acquisition and the catalog's value aren't being disclosed. But the fact that a brand new company launched specifically around this catalog tells its own story about scale. It's worth remembering where this all started, though. Not with a corporate acquisition, but with a teenager writing songs in Virginia. Elliott's path into the industry began with a girl group, before any of this catalog business existed. Her professional career kicked off in the early 1990s as part of the group Sista, which itself was part of a larger collective called Swing Mob. Her professional music career began in the early 1990s when she was part of the girl group Sista, which was part of the larger group Swing Mob. That's the unglamorous starting point. A girl group deal, one of hundreds that came and went in that era. Almost nobody remembers Sista today, but that's where the pen game started. After Sista ran its course, Elliott didn't disappear. She pivoted straight into writing and producing for other people, which turned out to be the smartest possible move for someone who wanted more than a single hit record. Once the group disbanded, she moved into songwriting and production, penning hits for artists like Aaliyah, Whitney Houston, and Destiny's Child. That stretch is the foundation everything else got built on. Before there was a solo star, there was a hired gun writing hits for everybody else, cashing publishing checks long before her own face was on an album cover. It was during this stretch that her sound with Timbaland really started to take shape, and that partnership became one of the most valuable creative relationships in modern music. It wasn't just a friendship, it was a business engine. The two of them, longtime collaborators from Virginia, started giving her ideas actual form. Continuing to team up with Timbaland, Elliott began giving her own genius some form, writing intricate, witty raps and pairing them with out-of-this-world visuals. That partnership didn't just produce hits for Elliott, it produced hits for a roster of other artists too, meaning both of them kept collecting production and songwriting credits across the industry for years. Her actual breakthrough single as a lead artist deserves its own mention here, because it's the moment the writing career and the performing career merged into one. It was the record that made the industry stop and pay attention to her as a frontwoman, not just a ghostwriter. She'd already built goodwill with features on tracks by Sean Combs, New Edition, and MC Lyte, but it was her debut single, The Rain, that turned heads, eventually going certified platinum. It was the success of her debut single, The Rain, that earned the world's devout attention and became a certified platinum album. That's the pivot point. Everything from goldmine to the endorsement deals, to the honorary doctorates, traces back to that single record landing the way it did. Once that solo career took off, the label deal that came with it matters just as much as the songs. She didn't sign away everything to a faceless major. She negotiated a deal that gave her a label of her own tucked inside the bigger machine, Her sound caught the attention of executives and led to a deal with Elektra Records. Her unique sound and innovative production style caught the attention of record executives, leading to a record deal with Elektra Records in 1997. Goldmine operated under that Elektra umbrella, and later, when the parent company restructured, the new owners merged Elektra with sister label Atlantic Records, transferring Elliott and Goldmine along with it. Ownership followed her even through corporate shuffling. Now let's talk numbers on the recorded side of things, because this is where casual math gets people confused about how someone can be worth $50 million without constant chart-topping hits in the last several years. She's released 6 studio albums total, and across that run, she sold more than 30 million records worldwide. Missy Elliott was the first female rapper inducted into the Songwriters Hall of Fame and has sold over 30 million records in the United States. Other tallies push that even higher once you count worldwide sales and features together. Some sources put her total sales figure well past 40 million, once you factor in every feature, remix, and compilation appearance across her career, a number that puts her at the top of the list among female rappers for total units moved. The Grammys tell a similar story of consistency rather than a single flash of success. She didn't win one award and vanish. She kept winning across different eras of her career, which matters because award wins tend to bump catalog value and sync licensing rates. She's earned 5 Grammy Awards across her catalog and behind-the-scenes work. Missy Elliott has sold over 30 million records in the United States, alongside those wins solidifying her as one of the genre's most decorated women. Every Grammy win also means another wave of streaming and sales for the associated songs, which loops directly back into the publishing income she still collects today. Let's zoom out on what this section has actually shown, because it's easy to get lost in names and numbers. The picture that's forming is that Missy Elliott's fortune isn't really about Missy Elliott the rapper. It's about Missy Elliott, the person who owns pieces of songs, owns a label, and now finds herself at the center of one of the biggest publishing acquisitions of the year. That's the machine running quietly in the background while she does interviews or performs at award shows. Songs written in the 90s for Aaliyah are still generating revenue in a deal announced this year, sitting inside a catalog worth enough to launch an entire company around it. And we haven't even gotten to the sneakers, the clothing lines, or the real estate yet, because those are a completely different revenue stream that's stacked right on top of everything we've just covered. It's also worth pointing out how rare this setup actually is in hip-hop, especially for a woman who came up in the late 90s. Most artists from that era either lost control of their masters, sold their publishing outright for a lump sum, or never had ownership to begin with. Elliott, by starting her own label the same year she dropped her debut album, avoided a huge chunk of that trap right out of the gate. Owning Goldmine gave her leverage that a lot of her peers simply didn't have when major labels came calling with contracts. That single decision, made before she'd even proven herself as a solo star, is arguably the single most important financial move of her entire career, more important than any individual hit song. So as we move into the next part of this story, keep that foundation in mind: a label she owns, a songwriting catalog worth enough to anchor a new publishing company, and decades of production credits stacked behind some of the biggest names in music history. Because next, we're going to look at what happens when that same business instinct gets pointed at fashion, footwear, and brand deals, the part of her empire that put her face on sneakers before almost any other woman in hip-hop ever got that chance. That's where things get even more interesting, because it's not just about music anymore. It's about a rapper turning her image into a product line, years before celebrity brand deal became the industry standard it is today. If the first part of Missy Elliott's empire was built on pens and paperwork, this next part was built on tracksuits and sneakers. And it starts with a moment that a lot of people forget was actually a business pitch in disguise. At the 2003 Grammys, Elliott showed up in a pink Adidas velour tracksuit that turned heads. That single outfit choice ended up sparking one of the most important endorsement deals in hip-hop history. They flipped Elliott's pink Adidas velour tracksuit at the 2003 Grammys into the first major sneaker deal for a female rap artist, Missy Elliott's 2004 Adidas Respect, ME line. That's the origin story. Not a boardroom pitch meeting, but a look at an award show that Adidas executives couldn't stop thinking about. The deal that followed wasn't small or symbolic. Adidas officially announced its partnership the following year, and it was framed as a genuine co-branding opportunity, not just a licensing arrangement where she got paid to wear the shoes. Costume designer June Ambrose, who worked closely with Elliott on her looks, later explained just how significant that moment was, saying it mattered for Elliott as an artist to land a co-branding opportunity with a global brand like Adidas. That's a very different arrangement than a simple paid endorsement. Co-branding means shared ownership of the creative direction, and often a cut of the actual sales, a structure that gave Elliott real financial upside tied to how well the collection performed in stores. The collection itself had a name that made her ownership stake obvious right in the branding. It wasn't called Missy Elliott for Adidas, it was called Respect ME, her own initials, front and center. The line launched in the fall of 2004, and it wasn't just sneakers. It included a full range of apparel and accessories, with part of the proceeds going toward a cause close to her own story. The lineup included sneakers, a range of apparel and accessories, with a portion of sales benefiting the nonprofit Break the Cycle, whose mission was to identify and prevent domestic violence. That detail matters because it ties directly back to her own upbringing, which we'll get into later. But for now, just note that even her business ventures carried a piece of her personal history embedded in them. The scale of the rollout was serious too. This wasn't a limited drop in a handful of boutique stores. It was built to be a real retail presence across multiple countries. The line debuted in roughly 500 stores across the United States before expanding internationally. The label debuted in approximately 500 stores in the USA in September and in Europe and Asia in November. That's the kind of footprint that generates real royalty income, not just a press release and a photo op. 500 stores domestically, then a full international expansion within the same year. Adidas itself wasn't shy about how big they expected this to be financially. Company executives went on record projecting serious revenue targets for the very first season of the collection. A representative for the brand told the press that Respect ME had 3 separate divisions and was projected to become a multi-million-dollar line within its first season. Multiple divisions, multiple product categories, multiple countries, all wrapped around one woman's initials on a shoebox. That's a completely different kind of deal than most musicians were getting at that point in hip-hop history. What made this deal historically significant, beyond the dollar figures, is that it broke a barrier that had existed in sportswear for decades. Signature deals were reserved almost exclusively for athletes, not musicians, and especially not women in hip-hop. Before Elliott, athletic brands treated signature lines as something earned through sport, not stage presence. Once upon a time, athletic apparel companies only sponsored the world's top athletes, and having your name stamped on a sneaker was reserved almost solely for people who needed sneakers to do their job. She broke into a lane that women in rap simply hadn't been offered before, becoming the first female rapper to profit from a major athletic apparel endorsement. It's worth understanding the business logic Adidas was chasing here too, because it explains why they bet so heavily on her specifically rather than another artist of the era. She represented exactly the demographic shift the brand needed at the time. The move was aimed at capturing a younger market that needed style and personality attached to a product, not just technical performance. Adidas roped in Missy Elliott's image in 2002 to cater to a new market segment that needed a cool theme, rather than the utility of the product. And Elliott was the hip-hop figure of the time, with a strong influence on urban style and fashion. In marketing terms, that's about as clean a fit as a brand could ask for. An artist whose entire aesthetic was already built around bold, futuristic style choices that translated directly onto sneakers and streetwear. Her personal history with the brand also made the whole thing feel authentic rather than a random corporate pairing, which mattered a lot for how the public received it. She wasn't wearing Adidas because a contract told her to. She'd worn it long before any deal existed. An Adidas creative director noted that she'd worn the brand for years before the partnership even started, adding that the company always liked how she customized and personalized their products. He said his company had long taken note of how Elliott wears Adidas products and makes them her own, adding that she has chosen to wear Adidas for years before we started this deal, and we always liked what she did with our products. That authenticity is a big part of why the deal worked commercially. Audiences could tell the difference between a paid placement and a genuine relationship, and this one read as genuine. 2 decades later, that relationship hadn't ended. It evolved. Adidas brought her back for one of their biggest recent campaigns, proving the partnership had staying power well beyond its original run. More than 20 years after the original Respect ME line, Elliott returned to front the relaunch of one of Adidas's most iconic sneaker silhouettes, appearing alongside other cultural figures in a campaign built around originality and legacy. Elliott came back with her beloved brand for the rebirth of the Adidas Originals Superstar silhouette in a campaign packed with cultural icons old and new, from Samuel L. Jackson to Anthony Edwards and Glorilla. That kind of longevity in a brand relationship is rare. Most celebrity sneaker deals last a season or two before the brand moves on to the next phase. Hers lasted over 20 years and got revived at scale. Adidas Originals, the specific division behind both eras of her partnership, has its own story worth touching on, because it explains why the brand kept coming back to her specifically for these culture-driven campaigns rather than a rotating cast of new faces. The sub-brand was created to reimagine pieces from the company's own archive, using a trefoil logo that dates back over 50 years. The sub-brand was created in 2001 to reimagine key pieces within the company's archives, using the trefoil logo that was introduced in 1972. Over the years, that division has partnered with a short list of culturally significant acts and designers. Run DMC, Y3, Kith, Pharrell Williams' Human Race, Sporty and Rich, and others. Elliott, sitting on that list twice, over 2 decades apart, says something about how the brand values her specifically. A brand executive summed up exactly what that continued relationship represents from Adidas's side, framing the sneaker itself as a symbol bigger than footwear, something tied to attitude and independence rather than just performance specs. Adidas's vice president of marketing described the shoe as more than just a product, saying the Superstar has always been more than just a sneaker. It's a symbol of originality and a spark for cultural change. It's been worn by those who don't wait for permission to lead. Put Elliott in that sentence, and it tracks perfectly with everything about her career. Someone who built a label, a catalog, and now a fashion legacy without waiting for permission from anyone in the industry. Now, sneakers weren't the only fashion lane she moved into. Years after the original Adidas run, she added another major label partnership to her resume, this time stepping into streetwear with a brand built specifically around hip-hop culture. In 2019, she launched a clothing line in partnership with Fubu. In 2019, she launched a clothing line with FUBU. And in 2021, she partnered with Nike to release a sneaker collection. Fubu itself carries weight in hip-hop history as one of the earliest Black-owned streetwear brands to go mainstream. So pairing with them wasn't just a licensing deal. It connected her to a lineage of hip-hop entrepreneurship that predates even her own career. That same year, she circled back to footwear again, but this time with a different giant in the sportswear space entirely. A brand that historically had been even more selective than Adidas about who got a signature deal. Her partnership with Nike produced a sneaker collection in 2021, adding yet another footwear credit to a resume that already included a landmark Adidas run. She partnered with Nike to release a sneaker collection. Landing deals with both Adidas and Nike across a career is genuinely rare air. Most artists get exclusivity with one brand or the other. Elliott moved between both years apart without burning bridges at either company. All of this fashion and footwear activity sits on top of, not instead of, her music income, which is the key thing to understand about how someone reaches an 8-figure net worth without needing a #1 single every single year. Her wealth comes from stacked, overlapping income streams rather than one dominant source. Multiple income streams including album sales, tours, songwriting, and production all feed into the same pot. With multiple income streams including album sales, tours, songwriting, and production, her net worth is estimated to be $50 million. Add fashion royalties and endorsement fees on top of that music foundation, and you start to see how the number holds steady even in years when she's not actively touring or releasing new albums. It's also worth noting how these brand deals reinforced her music career rather than existing separately from it, because that's the smartest part of the whole strategy. The Adidas deal was one Elliott had leaned into for years through her videos and stage looks, so the endorsement didn't feel like a departure. It felt like a continuation of her actual identity. Her stylist put it simply, noting the brand had been a huge part of her visual world for years. From the start, Elliott has been inseparable from a vibrantly infinite universe of remixed sportswear, and together they ushered in a new spin on Adidas. That consistency between her art and her endorsements is exactly why the deals lasted as long as they did, and why brands kept coming back decades later instead of treating her like a one-off campaign face. Beyond the two footwear giants, Elliott's business ventures extended into acting too, which added yet another income stream separate from music and fashion entirely, even if it's a smaller piece of the overall pie compared to touring or publishing. She appeared in films including Honey and Fame, and also took on directing duties for several of her own music videos, as well as videos for other artists. Beyond music, Missy Elliott has ventured into acting, appearing in films like Honey and Fame. She has also directed several of her own music videos and those of other artists. Directing, in particular, is another quiet revenue stream, because video production credits come with their own fees and sometimes residual payments, separate entirely from the song rights themselves. Let's talk about the actual scale of what these ventures added up to, in real dollar terms during her peak earning years, because this is where the fashion and music income streams visibly combine into one number that outside observers could actually track. According to Forbes reporting, in 2020, she earned $14 million in a single year, a figure that placed her among the highest paid female rappers of that year. According to Forbes, in 2020, she earned $14 million, making her one of the highest paid female rappers of the year. That single year number is roughly a quarter of her entire estimated net worth, generated in 12 months, which tells you these brand deals and catalog royalties weren't small side income. They were doing real heavy lifting. It's important to point out that income like that doesn't stay flat every year. And that's normal for anyone whose earnings depend heavily on touring schedules and the timing of new deals rather than a steady salary. Reports note her annual income can shift significantly depending on how active her touring calendar is in a given year. Alongside whatever new business activities she's got in motion, her annual income can fluctuate significantly depending on her touring schedule and business activities. That volatility is standard for any entertainer at her level. The difference for Elliott is that she has more income streams than most artists, which smooths out the dips when touring slows down the catalog and endorsement money keeps arriving anyway. Stepping back, what this section shows is that Elliott didn't just license her name to brands for a quick check the way a lot of artists did in the 2000s and 2010s. She built long relationships, Adidas twice, decades apart, plus Fubu and Nike layered on top, each one tied to a genuine piece of her own image, rather than a generic celebrity face slapped on a product. That's a completely different business model than a one-off endorsement check. It's closer to what modern brand strategists call an equity partnership, where the artist's actual identity becomes part of the product's value, not just a marketing sticker on the box. And all of that fashion money sits on top of the songwriting, production, and label income from the previous section, which starts to explain how you get to $50 million without a single blockbuster album in the last few years. So now that we've covered the pens and paperwork side of her business and the sneakers and streetwear side of her business, it's time to go look at where all that money has actually gone, because owning a catalog and a shoe deal means nothing if you can't point to what it bought. That's where the real estate and the lifestyle assets come in. The mansions, the cars, the physical proof of decades of stacked income. And that part of the story gets a lot more specific about what $50 million actually looks like once it's converted into property and possessions. Let's go look at exactly what Missy Elliott owns. So here's where the story gets tangible. Actual property, actual cars, actual square footage. Because owning a record label and a shoe deal is one thing, but converting that into real assets is where a net worth number stops being abstract. Elliott's real estate holdings are described as spanning multiple states, which fits the picture of someone who's been earning steadily for close to 3 decades, rather than someone who got a single windfall and spent it all in one place. Missy Elliott's assets include real estate properties across the United States. That spread across states also makes financial sense for someone whose career has kept her moving between music hubs for most of her adult life. Virginia, where she's from, and Atlanta, where a huge chunk of the music industry's business gets done. Let's start with home base, Virginia. This isn't just sentimental attachment to where she grew up. It's an actual substantial property that shows up consistently across reporting on her assets. Reports describe a large home in Virginia, with estimates on its value, varying depending on the source, ranging from around $5 million to $7 million. She owns a luxurious mansion in Virginia, valued at around $7 million. That's a serious piece of property for someone whose career started in girl groups and songwriting gigs in the early 90s. It represents decades of accumulated income poured back into the place she came from. Beyond Virginia, there's also a home in Atlanta, which lines up with the broader pattern of major hip-hop and R&B figures, basing part of their lives out of that city given how much of the industry's business, labels, studios, publishing deals, runs through it. Reporting places that second property alongside the Virginia estate as part of her core real estate holdings and a home in Atlanta, Georgia. 2 properties in 2 different states, both tied to different chapters of her career. One home base rooted in her origins, another rooted in the modern industry hub where a lot of her business dealings likely happen. Now let's talk about the garage, because this is where the numbers get a lot more visual for people trying to picture what $50 million actually looks like day to day. Her car collection includes some of the most recognizable luxury brands in the world. She also owns several high-end cars, including a Rolls-Royce Ghost, a Bentley Continental, and a Lamborghini Gallardo. A Rolls-Royce, a Bentley, and a Lamborghini in the same collection puts her in a very specific tier of car ownership, the kind reserved for people whose income has been consistent enough for long enough to justify that kind of spending without it being reckless. Other reporting on her vehicle collection lists slightly different specific models, which is common with celebrity asset reporting, since fleets change over time and get updated, sold, or swapped out. One version of the list mentions a Rolls-Royce Phantom alongside a Bentley Continental GT as part of her significant car collection. She also has a significant car collection, including a Rolls-Royce Phantom and a Bentley Continental GT. Whether it's a Ghost or a Phantom, the pattern holds. Rolls-Royce and Bentley both show up consistently across independent write-ups of her assets, which suggests those brands, at minimum, have been a real fixture in her garage for years. Now here's the thing that actually matters more than any single car or house. It's what these assets sit on top of. Reporting on her finances consistently circles back to one specific point. The songs are the real foundation underneath everything else she owns. Multiple sources describe her music catalog and publishing rights as her single most valuable category of asset, more valuable than any property or car. Her music catalog and publishing rights are among her most valuable assets. That lines up perfectly with everything covered in the first part of this story. The gold mine label, the decades of writing credits, and now the legacy publishing deal, putting a spotlight on exactly how much that catalog is worth in today's market. That catalog doesn't just sit there quietly, either it actively generates income year after year, which is a very different kind of asset than a house or a car that mostly just holds or loses value over time. Reports describe the catalog and publishing rights as generating substantial royalties on an ongoing basis. Elliott's music catalog and publishing rights are among her most valuable assets, generating substantial royalties. A mansion doesn't pay you back every time someone streams a song. A publishing catalog does. That's the fundamental difference between her real estate and her music rights, even though both get lumped together under assets in most net worth breakdowns. Let's put a number on the overall picture, because all of these individual pieces, the homes, the cars, the catalog, roll up into the estimate that keeps showing up across financial reporting on her career. Across multiple sources, the consistent figure attached to her total wealth sits at $50 million. Missy Elliott is an American rapper, singer, songwriter, and music producer who has a net worth of $50 million. That figure has held steady across several years of reporting rather than swinging wildly, which actually says something positive about how stable her income streams are compared to artists whose net worth estimates jump around based on a single hit or flop. It's worth understanding how a number like that actually gets calculated in the first place, because it's not like anyone at a bank is publishing her balance sheet for reporters. These estimates get built from public data points. The disclaimer attached to most of these figures is straightforward. All net worths are calculated using data drawn from public sources. That means record sales figures, known endorsement deal sizes, real estate records, and reported income years like the $14 million figure from 2020 all get pieced together to arrive at an estimate. It's not exact, but it's grounded in real, documented numbers rather than guesswork. Now, here's something that doesn't usually make it into the glossy asset lists, but absolutely belongs in this conversation, because it explains why she's been so protective of her money and her image throughout her career. Her health. Elliott was diagnosed with Graves' disease, a hyperthyroidism disorder, after nearly getting into a car accident caused by leg spasms, after nearly crashing a car because she was suffering from leg spasms. She was diagnosed with Graves' disease, a hyperthyroidism disorder. A health scare like that changes how a person thinks about their career pace, their touring schedule, and honestly, how much they lean into passive income like publishing and licensing, rather than grinding out endless tour dates. It's not a stretch to connect the dots between that diagnosis and the smart, ownership-heavy business model she'd already started building. Her upbringing also plays directly into why ownership mattered so much to her from the very start of her career, and it's a piece of her story that gets referenced constantly whenever her business decisions come up. She grew up in a household affected by domestic violence, describing a rough childhood where her father was abusive toward her mother. Growing up, she experienced a rough childhood, and her father was allegedly violent and regularly abused her mother until one day she fled away with her. That backstory connects directly to the charity tie-in we covered earlier, the Break the Cycle partnership baked into her Adidas line, aimed at preventing domestic violence. Her business decisions weren't just profit-driven. They carried her actual history inside them. Family structure is another detail that helps explain her financial decision-making. Over the years, since she doesn't have siblings splitting inheritance conversations or complicating estate matters the way large families sometimes do, she is her parents' only child. Education is another thread worth pulling on here, because despite not following the traditional college path, she's been recognized at an academic level that a lot of traditionally educated executives never reach. She didn't attend college, but she holds 2 honorary doctorate degrees, one from Berklee College of Music and another from Norfolk State University. The singer did not attend college, but has 2 honorary doctorate degrees, one from Berklee College of Music and the other from Norfolk State University. Those honors matter beyond prestige. They're tied to institutions with real influence in the music business. And that kind of recognition often opens doors for future business partnerships, speaking engagements, and brand affiliations that carry an academic credibility most musicians simply don't have access to. 14. She's also been recognized on an international stage in a way that connects directly back to her business acumen rather than just her music, which is a distinction worth making since a lot of award recognition in music skips right past the entrepreneurial side entirely. She received the Women's Entrepreneurship Day Music Pioneer Award, presented by the United Nations. The mother of 2 also holds 2 honorary doctorates and was honored with the Women's Entrepreneurship Day Music Pioneer Award, presented by the United Nations, an award specifically tied to entrepreneurship. Coming from a body as large as the United Nations is a pretty clear external confirmation that the business side of her career, not just the music, has been noticed and validated at the highest levels. 15. Let's circle back to the car and home breakdown one more time, because there's a consistency across independent reporting that's worth highlighting. Different outlets, different years, describing largely the same core assets. Whether the figure quoted for her Virginia home lands closer to $5 million or $7 million, and whether the Rolls-Royce in question is a ghost or a phantom, the underlying pattern across every single source stays the same. Missy Elliott's assets include real estate, and she owns a luxurious home in Virginia. That consistency across multiple independent write-ups, even with small variations in specific figures, adds credibility to the overall $50 million estimate, rather than undermining it. The broad strokes line up every time. 16. It's also worth pointing out what's notably absent from every single one of these asset breakdowns. There's no mention anywhere of massive debt, bankruptcy filings, or public financial trouble tied to her name, which is not something you can say about every artist from her era. A lot of her late 90s and early 2000s peers went through very public financial struggles, as the music industry shifted underneath them with the rise of streaming. Elliott's asset profile, by contrast, reads as stable and steadily growing rather than volatile. That stability circles back to the ownership model, established all the way back in 1997 with Goldmine. Owning your masters and your publishing means the ground doesn't shift under you, the same way it does for artists who signed away everything for an upfront advance. 17. Let's also touch on the annual income side one more time, because there's a separate estimate that shows up alongside the $50 million net worth figure, and it's worth distinguishing between the two, since people often confuse net worth with yearly earnings. Beyond the standout $14 million year in 2020, More general estimates place her typical annual income closer to $5 million in years without a major deal or tour cycle. Missy Elliott's annual income is estimated to be around $5 million. That gap between a typical year and a standout year like 2020 shows exactly how lumpy entertainment income can be. Steady baseline royalties most years, with occasional massive spikes when a big deal, tour or catalog event lands. 18. Something else worth noting. None of this accounts for whatever she's earning right now off the back of the legacy publishing deal, since financial terms of that specific transaction were never made public. That means her actual current net worth could realistically sit higher than the $50 million estimate that keeps circulating. Catalog acquisitions at that scale, over 800 songs, spanning some of the most sampled and licensed recordings in modern R&B and hip-hop, typically involve payouts in the tens of millions when major names are involved, even when the individual songwriter's specific cut isn't disclosed. So the 50 million figure should probably be read as a floor, not a ceiling. It's the number based on publicly documented assets and income. Whatever she's collecting from a catalog deal, this significant likely isn't fully baked into that estimate yet. 19. Stepping back again. What this section shows is that the assets match the income story from the earlier parts of this script almost perfectly. A publishing-heavy, ownership-heavy career produces exactly this kind of asset profile. Real estate in more than one state, a luxury car collection built over decades rather than bought in one splurge, and no visible financial distress anywhere in the public record. It's the physical evidence of a career built on royalties and ownership rather than one-off paychecks. Every mansion and every car in that garage traces back to a decision made decades ago to own the label, own the publishing, and take the co-branding deal instead of the simple endorsement check. That's a very different story than a lot of artists from her generation can tell, and it sets up the next part of this story perfectly, because owning things is one thing, but getting formally recognized by the industry's biggest institutions is what cements a legacy and frankly keeps that catalog value climbing for decades to come. 20. So next, we're heading into the recognition side of the empire, the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame, the Songwriters Hall of Fame, the Video Vanguard Award. Because every one of those honors isn't just a trophy on a shelf. Each one carries real weight in how catalogs get valued, how brands decide who to partner with, and how a career gets remembered and monetized for decades after the hits stop coming. This is where the story shifts from, here's what she owns, to, here's why the industry itself decided she belonged in its history books, and how that recognition fed directly back into the business we've spent this whole script laying out. Let's go look at exactly how historic that recognition actually was. 1. Let's talk about what actually cements an empire like this for the long haul. Not just the money moving today, but the institutional recognition that keeps a catalog valuable for decades after an artist stops actively releasing new music. Elliott's most significant piece of recognition came when she was announced as a nominee for the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame. And it wasn't just an honor, it was a historic first. She became the first female hip-hop artist ever nominated for that institution in her first year of eligibility. That kind of first status matters enormously for catalog value, because Hall of Fame recognition tends to trigger renewed streaming interest, sync licensing demand, and press coverage, all of which loop directly back into royalty income. 2. The scale of that nomination class puts her achievement in real context. She wasn't nominated alongside unknowns. She was up against some of the biggest names across multiple genres of music history that year. The 2023 nominee list included Kate Bush, Sheryl Crow, Cyndi Lauper, Iron Maiden, Joy Division and New Order, George Michael, Willie Nelson, Rage Against the Machine, Soundgarden, A Tribe Called Quest, The White Stripes, and Warren Zevon. Elliott joined a list of 2023 nominees that also included Kate Bush, Sheryl Crow, Cyndi Lauper, Iron Maiden, Joy Division, New Order, George Michael, Willie Nelson, Rage Against the Machine, Soundgarden, A Tribe Called Quest, The White Stripes, and Warren Zevon. Standing in that company as the only female hip-hop nominee tells you exactly how significant the industry considered her body of work at that point in her career. 3. Her own reaction to the nomination captured just how much weight she personally put on the honor, and it's worth understanding her actual words rather than just the headline of the achievement. She described the recognition as deeply meaningful, saying it meant a great deal to know her music had reached and touched people beyond her own expectations, I've spent my career making the kind of music I love, and it means so much to know that I have touched others as well. That reaction wasn't manufactured PR language. It reads as someone who understood exactly how rare this specific first was, especially given how long hip-hop had been excluded or under-recognized by institutions built around rock music's history. 4. The nomination turned into an actual induction later that same year, and the ceremony itself became a genuine cultural moment, not just an industry formality tucked away in an awards show most casual fans skip past. Elliott officially became the first female rapper to have her name etched into the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame, inducted alongside a group of legendary names spanning multiple genres. The American rapper made history by becoming the first female rapper enshrined in the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame, inducted together with musical figures like Sheryl Crow, Chaka Khan, and Willie Nelson. Being inducted alongside artists of that stature places her firmly in company with hip-hop's other Hall of Fame representatives, a very short list that includes some of the genre's most influential acts. 5. That short list of hip-hop inductees is worth naming directly, because it shows exactly how exclusive this recognition actually is within the genre, even decades after hip-hop became the most commercially dominant genre in American music. Before her induction, the genre's only representatives in the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame were Run DMC, the Beastie Boys, Eminem, Public Enemy, and Jay-Z. While being the first female artist to receive the honor, Missy Elliott also joins the handful of hip-hop artists to be inducted into the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame, with Run DMC, the Beastie Boys, Eminem, Public Enemy, and Jay-Z being the previous recipients. Being the first woman added to that specific list, after decades of hip-hop's biggest female stars going unrecognized by the institution, is exactly the kind of historic marker that gets referenced in every future conversation about her legacy. 6. The ceremony itself carried extra symbolic weight too, thanks to who was chosen to introduce her on stage. Another towering figure in women's hip-hop history, passing the torch in a very literal public way. Queen Latifah delivered the induction speech, and her framing of the moment captured the emotional weight of the occasion perfectly, asking the crowd directly, "You feel free?" That question, coming from one legendary female MC to another, on a stage that had excluded women rappers for its entire history up to that point, landed as more than ceremony. It landed as a statement about everything that induction represented, for an entire generation of artists who came before and after both of them. 7. It's also worth noting the format of that particular ceremony, because it marked a first in its own right, extending the reach of the moment well beyond the people physically in the room that night. That year's ceremony was the first Rock and Roll Hall of Fame induction to be streamed online, meaning the moment reached a far bigger audience than any prior induction night in the institution's history. This was the first time that the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame induction ceremony was streamed online. A first-of-its-kind streamed broadcast, capturing a first-of-its-kind induction, is the kind of layered historic moment that tends to get referenced for years afterward, which again directly feeds catalog interest and licensing demand. 8. Now, before the Rock Hall recognition even happened, there was another induction a few years earlier that arguably laid the groundwork for everything that followed, one specifically tied to her identity as a songwriter, not just a performer. In 2019, Elliott became the first female rapper inducted into the Songwriters Hall of Fame, an institution that recognizes career-spanning songwriting contributions rather than individual hit songs. Missy Elliott made history as the first female rapper inducted into the Songwriters Hall of Fame, whose 2019 class also includes Cat Stevens and John Prine. That induction connects directly back to everything covered earlier about her writing credits for other artists: Aaliyah, Whitney Houston, Beyoncé, and beyond. This wasn't recognition for her own hits alone. It was recognition for decades of writing hits for other people too. 9. Being the third rapper ever inducted into that institution, following two of hip-hop's most commercially dominant names, places her achievement in even sharper context within the genre specifically. She followed Jay-Z's 2017 induction and Jermaine Dupri's 2018 induction, making her just the third rapper overall to enter the Songwriters Hall. Elliott is just the third rapper to enter into the Songwriters Hall, following Jay-Z and Jermaine Dupri's inductions in 2017 and 2018 respectively. 3 rappers total, ever, in an institution that's existed for decades, and she's the only woman among them. That exclusivity is exactly why this specific induction gets cited so often in discussions about her business legacy, not just her artistic 110. The eligibility rules for that Hall of Fame are also worth understanding because they underscore that this isn't an award for a hot streak. It's specifically designed to reward decades of sustained output. Songwriters only become eligible for induction after writing hit songs across a minimum of 20 years. Songwriters are eligible for induction after writing hit songs for at least 20 years. 20 years of hits across her own catalog and the catalogs of the artists she wrote for is exactly the kind of career arc that turns a musician into what the industry now treats as a genuine catalog asset. 11. There's a third major institutional honor worth covering here too, one that predates both the Rock Hall and Songwriters Hall recognition, and specifically celebrates her impact as a visual artist and video director rather than just a songwriter or performer. She became the first woman rapper and just the third rapper overall to receive the MTV Video Vanguard Award, an honor that recognizes lasting influence on music video as an art form. The rapper made her story as the first woman rapper and third rapper ever to be honored with a MTV Video Vanguard Award. That award ties directly back to her reputation for boundary-pushing, futuristic music videos, the visual side of her career that, alongside the songwriting, has kept her catalog culturally relevant for new generations, discovering her work decades after original release. 12. Her own public reaction to these accumulated honors, especially the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame induction specifically, revealed how personally significant she considered breaking these particular barriers, especially for the women who would come after her. She expressed hope that her induction would open doors for future recognition of other women in the genre, framing the moment as bigger than her own individual career. This one hits extra different as I hope it opens doors for other female MCs to be recognized. That framing, thinking about the artists who'd follow, rather than just celebrating her own achievement, lines up with a pattern that shows up throughout her career, where personal milestones consistently get tied back to opening doors for a wider group. 13. The Rock and Roll Hall of Fame's own chairman spoke about the broader significance of that entire nominee class, and his comments help explain why an institution historically associated with rock music increasingly makes room for hip-hop artists like her. John Sykes, chair of the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame Foundation, described the nominee list as reflecting the full breadth of artists and music the institution honors, saying these artists have created their own sounds that have impacted generations and influenced countless others that have followed in their footsteps. That statement captures exactly why institutional recognition matters financially, beyond the ceremony itself. It's a formal acknowledgement from the industry's own gatekeepers that an artist's influence extends well past their own charting singles. 14. Let's also look at the raw sales and streaming numbers that back up all of this institutional recognition, because Halls of Fame don't induct people based on vibes alone. They look at documented commercial impact across an entire career. She's recognized as the best-selling female rapper in Luminate's history, with more than 40 million records sold worldwide across her career. With more than 40 million records sold worldwide, she is the best-selling female rapper in Luminate history. That number, 40 million, is notably higher than some of the earlier 30 million estimates cited elsewhere, which reflects the fact that record sale tallies keep growing as new compilations, streaming conversions, and certifications get added over time. 15. Her album catalog itself also carries a specific record within the genre that's worth highlighting because it directly ties her commercial success to the institutional honors covered throughout this section. She holds the record for the most platinum albums by any woman rapper, and the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame's own profile on her leans into that specific distinction. Missy Elliott holds the record for most platinum albums by a woman rapper. That's not a subjective honor voted on by committee. It's a hard sale certification record verified by the RIAA, sitting underneath the more ceremonial Hall of Fame recognition. The commercial proof backing up the institutional praise. 16. Even the language used in her official Rock and Roll Hall of Fame profile speaks to how the industry now frames her cultural impact, not as a novelty or a footnote in hip-hop history, but as a genre-defining force in her own right. The Hall's own write-up describes her records as having a sense of discovery to them, comparing the listening experience to stumbling into an entirely different world. There's an aura of discovery to a Missy Elliott record. Listening is like stumbling into another world. That kind of institutional language, permanently attached to her name on the Hall's own website, is exactly the sort of long-term brand equity that keeps a catalog commercially relevant decades after the original release dates. 17. It's worth connecting all three of these major honors: Songwriters Hall, Video Vanguard, and Rock and Roll Hall, back to the actual business conversation from earlier parts of this story, because these aren't separate from her empire. They're part of what built it. Every one of these institutional firsts generates press coverage, streaming spikes, and renewed licensing interest. That's not a coincidence. Hall of Fame inductions and historic firsts are proven catalysts for exactly the kind of catalog revenue spike that made a company like Legacy Publishing want to buy into her body of work in the first place. In other words, the trophies and the money aren't two separate stories running in parallel. They're the same story, feeding into each other year after year, honor after honor. 18. Let's also touch on her broader influence on the artists who came after her, because that influence is part of why institutions kept recognizing her decades into her career rather than treating her as a nostalgia act from the late 90s. Her groundbreaking songs dealing with topics like feminism, gender equality, body positivity, and sex positivity opened doors for a whole generation of artists who followed. Her groundbreaking songs dealing with topics including feminism, gender equality, body positivity, and sex positivity blazed the trail for the likes of Destiny's Child, Eve, Macy Gray, Beyoncé, and Nicki Minaj. That kind of generational influence is exactly why award committees keep circling back to her decades after her commercial peak. It's not nostalgia. It's recognition of a continuing ripple effect across the genre. 19. Stepping back on all of this recognition, the pattern across every single institution is identical. She keeps being the first woman, or one of the very first, to break into spaces that had excluded women in hip-hop for the institution's entire prior existence. First female rapper in the Songwriters Hall of Fame. First woman rapper to win the Video Vanguard Award. First female rapper, and first female hip-hop artist overall, inducted into the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame. That's not a coincidence of good timing. It's a documented pattern of an artist whose career output demanded recognition institutions had simply never been forced to grapple with before. And each one of those firsts came with real financial consequences attached, whether it was renewed streaming interest, new licensing conversations, or simply added prestige that made a catalog more attractive to buyers down the line. 20. So with the recognition side of the story fully laid out, the trophies, the historic firsts, the institutional validation, it's time to bring this whole picture together and look at where the empire actually stands today. Right now, in the middle of an active publishing acquisition and a career still generating fresh headlines decades after it began. That's where we're headed next. The current state of the empire, what's still unfolding, and what all of this ownership, all these deals, and all these honors actually add up to for an artist who spent 30 years building something far bigger than a music career. Let's close this story out. 1. So here's where everything lands. Missy Elliott's $50 million empire isn't one big payday. It's dozens of smaller decisions stacked on top of each other for almost 30 years, starting with a teenager in a girl group and ending with her name sitting at the center of one of the biggest publishing acquisitions of the year. Every part of this story connects back to the same theme: ownership, the label she started the same year as her debut, the publishing rights she kept a hand in while writing for other artists, the co-branding deal instead of a simple endorsement check. Each decision compounded on the last one, and right now, in real time, that compounding is still happening. The Legacy Publishing deal isn't a closed chapter from years ago. It's an active, ongoing story, with new songs sampling that catalog getting released and generating streams as this very script gets put together. 2. Let's talk about what's actually still unresolved in this story, because that's what makes it worth paying attention to going forward, rather than treating it as a settled, finished narrative. The financial terms of the Legacy Publishing acquisition were never disclosed publicly, which means nobody outside a small circle of executives actually knows how much that catalog sale put into Elliott's pocket, or how her specific songwriter's share was structured within the broader 800-song deal. That's a genuinely open question. 3. Given the catalog includes some of the most heavily sampled and licensed recordings in modern R&B, Aaliyah's work in particular has become a constant presence in new releases. Whatever her cut turns out to be could meaningfully move the needle on that $50 million figure everyone keeps citing. 3. There's also the question of what happens next with that catalog specifically. Since the company behind the acquisition has made it clear, they're not just sitting on the songs. They're actively working them into new releases. 15 new songs sampling the catalog have already dropped, collectively pulling in hundreds of millions of streams. If that pace continues, the value tied to Elliott's portion of that catalog is likely to keep climbing, rather than plateauing, which is a very different trajectory than a lot of older catalogs experience. Once the original artist stops actively promoting them, that's the kind of asset that keeps paying out for decades, not because of anything new Elliott herself has to do, but because a whole industry of newer artists keeps finding new uses for songs she helped build 30 years ago. 4. It's also worth acknowledging the parts of this empire that are less about active deal-making and more about a legacy that's basically locked in at this point. Regardless of what happens with any future business deal, the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame plaque isn't going anywhere. The Songwriters Hall of Fame induction isn't getting reversed. The record for most platinum albums by a woman rapper stands as a documented, certified fact. Regardless of how the music business evolves from here, those honors function almost like a floor under the whole empire. A permanent baseline of institutional validation that keeps her catalog commercially relevant. No matter what happens with new deals, new acquisitions, or shifts in how the music industry values older recordings going forward. 5. Let's also revisit the through line about her upbringing one more time, because it's impossible to talk about the shape of this entire empire without acknowledging how directly her early life shaped the decisions that built it. A childhood marked by domestic violence pushed her toward independence early, first as a songwriter working for other artists to build income before she had her own solo deal. Then as a label owner who refused to hand over full control of her own work the way so many artists from her era did. Every major business decision in this story, from Goldmine to the Break the Cycle charity tie-in on her Adidas line, traces back to that same root. This wasn't just savvy business instinct. It was survival instinct, translated into contracts and ownership stakes instead of just performance. 6. Now here's something worth sitting with: the sheer breadth of names she's connected to across this story. Aaliyah, Whitney Houston, Beyonce, Timbaland, Jay-Z, Drake, Nas, Adidas, Nike, FUBU, the United Nations, the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame. That's an almost absurd range of institutions and artists for one person's business story to touch. Most careers, even successful ones, stay within a single lane: music or fashion or acting. Elliott's story runs through publishing law, sportswear marketing history, domestic violence advocacy, and institutional music history all at once. That breadth is exactly why this empire is so hard to summarize in a single sentence, and exactly why the pieces of it keep resurfacing in completely unrelated headlines. A new publishing deal here, a sneaker campaign relaunch there, an awards show tribute somewhere else. 7. Let's talk about what this means for anyone trying to actually understand modern celebrity wealth, because Elliott's story is a genuinely useful case study in how entertainment fortunes get built in the streaming era versus how they used to get built in the physical album era. In the physical album era, an artist's wealth was largely tied to units sold and touring revenue in the moment. Elliott's career straddled that era and the one that followed, and her business decisions, specifically owning her label and holding onto publishing rights, positioned her to benefit disproportionately once streaming turned old catalogs into perpetual revenue machines. That's not luck. Nobody in 1997 could have predicted streaming would exist, let alone that it would turn 30-year-old songs into constantly renewable income. But by choosing ownership over a quick advance check at every opportunity, she built a structure that happened to be perfectly positioned for a business model nobody could have foreseen at the time. It's also worth pointing out how rare it is for any artist, let alone a woman in hip-hop, from her specific era, to have avoided the financial pitfalls that swallowed so many of her peers. Bad contracts, lost masters, exploitative management deals. There's no public record of bankruptcy, no reported catalog disputes, no public battles over lost masters attached to her name, the way there are for a striking number of artists from the same period. That absence of financial disaster is, in its own quiet way, just as remarkable as any single deal covered in this story. Staying financially stable for 30 years in an industry notorious for chewing up and spitting out its biggest stars is its own kind of accomplishment, one that doesn't come with a trophy or a press release, but shows up clearly in the asset records covered earlier in this story. Let's also address the sneaker and fashion side one more time in this final stretch, because it's easy to treat those deals as a footnote next to the publishing story, when really they represent a genuinely separate and durable income stream that's lasted over 20 years at this point. From the 2004 Respect ME launch to the 2025 Adidas Superstar campaign, that's over 2 decades of an active relationship with a single brand, something almost no other musician turned endorser from that specific era can claim. Add the FUBU and Nike deals on top, and fashion alone represents a multi-decade, multi-brand income stream running in parallel with everything else. That's the kind of longevity that doesn't happen by accident. Brands don't keep coming back to someone for 20+ years unless the partnership is actually working commercially, which circles back to everything covered about why Adidas specifically valued the authenticity of her connection to their products in the first place. Now, let's think about what all of this actually adds up to for the next generation of artists watching from the sidelines, because Elliott's specific path offers a genuinely useful blueprint that a lot of newer artists are now consciously trying to replicate. Start your own label the moment you have the leverage to do it. Keep writing and producing for other people, because those publishing credits compound quietly for decades. Take co-branding deals over simple endorsement checks whenever the option exists. Build institutional recognition through consistency rather than chasing a single viral moment. Every one of those principles shows up somewhere in this story, and every one of them is now standard advice given to younger artists trying to build something that lasts longer than a 2-year hot streak. Elliott didn't write that playbook down anywhere formally, but her career is essentially the textbook version of it. There's also a broader industry lesson buried in this story about how publishing catalogs specifically have become one of the most sought-after asset classes in the entire entertainment business, which is worth understanding as its own trend separate from Elliott's individual story. Catalogs have become highly sought-after assets for their long-term revenue potential through streaming, licensing, film placements, and brand partnerships. Industry observers say the launch reflects the continued surge in music rights investments, as publishing catalogs have become highly sought-after assets for their long-term revenue potential through streaming, licensing, film placements, and brand partnerships. Elliott's catalog, sitting at the center of one of these major acquisitions, isn't a one-off story about her specifically. It's part of a much bigger wave of investment firms and publishing companies racing to buy up classic recordings before their value climbs even higher. That wave of investment is expected to keep growing, and industry commentary suggests catalogs like the one containing Elliott's work will only become more commercially and culturally significant as time goes on, not less. Classic catalogs and iconic recordings continue to generate significant commercial and cultural value decades after their original release. The company's debut signals another major development in the evolving music publishing landscape, where classic catalogs and iconic recordings continue to generate significant commercial and cultural value decades after their release. That trend line points in exactly one direction for anyone whose work is embedded in these kinds of catalogs: upward. Which means whatever number gets attached to Elliott's net worth today is very likely a conservative snapshot of where things stand a few years from now. Let's also acknowledge the parts of her story that remain genuinely private, because for all the documented deals and honors covered across this entire script, there's still a considerable amount about her actual finances that simply isn't public record. We don't know her exact stake in Goldmine's current operations. We don't know the precise royalty splits on decades of writing credits for other artists. We don't know the specific dollar figure tied to her portion of the legacy publishing deal. These gaps aren't oversights in reporting. They're the normal, expected privacy that surrounds any high-level entertainment business deal. What we do have is a consistent, well-documented pattern across public sources, real estate vehicles, decades of writing and production credits, multiple major brand partnerships, and institutional recognition spanning 3 separate halls of fame and industry honors. That pattern is more than enough to understand the shape of the empire, even without every private number filled in. It's worth reflecting, too, on just how unusual it is for a career built primarily in the 1990s and 2000s to still be generating fresh business headlines in 2026, more than a quarter century after her debut album first hit stores. Most artists from that specific commercial peak have settled into legacy act status by now, touring nostalgia circuits, licensing their old hits occasionally, but rarely showing up in active business news. Elliott's name showing up at the center of a brand new publishing company launch and fronting a brand new sneaker campaign. both within the same recent stretch, is genuinely unusual longevity. That kind of continued relevance doesn't happen to catalogs that faded into pure nostalgia. It happens to catalogs that stayed actively useful to new artists, new brands, and new business ventures, which is exactly the position her body of work currently occupies. Let's bring the health thread back one more time too, because it connects directly to how she's managed her career pace over the past several years, and by extension, how she's approached the balance between active touring income and passive catalog income. Living with a chronic condition like Graves' disease for years now likely factors into decisions about how much active touring she takes on, versus how much she leans on the passive income generated by publishing, licensing, and brand royalties covered throughout this whole story. That's speculative to a degree, since she hasn't laid out a detailed financial strategy tied explicitly to her health in interviews. But given how much of her documented income now comes from catalog and brand royalties rather than constant live performance, the overall pattern fits a deliberate shift towards sustainable, lower physical demand revenue streams. Let's also take stock of what this story says about representation in the music business more broadly. Since so much of Elliott's specific empire was built by breaking into spaces that simply hadn't been open to women in hip-hop before her. First female rapper with a major athletic apparel signature line. First female rapper in the Songwriters Hall of Fame. First woman rapper with the MTV Video Vanguard Award. First female hip-hop artist in the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame. Every single first attached to her name represents a door that had simply never been opened for a woman in this specific genre before she walked through it. That pattern isn't incidental to the business story. It's central to it. Being first in each of these spaces meant negotiating deals and institutional recognition with zero precedent to point to. No template from a predecessor to lean on. That makes every deal and every honor covered in this script even more significant than it would be for an artist following in someone else's already established footsteps. Now, thinking about where things stand today specifically, with a new publishing company built around her catalog, an ongoing sneaker relationship with one of the world's biggest sportswear brands, and institutional recognition locked in permanently across 3 major halls of fame, the empire looks less like a finished monument and more like a still active business with multiple moving parts. New songs are still getting released that sample her old work. New streaming numbers are still climbing on releases tied to her catalog. New campaigns are still getting shot with her face attached to major sportswear brands. None of that reads like a career winding down. It reads like a business still generating fresh revenue and fresh headlines in real time. That's the part of this story that stays open-ended, deliberately. There's no tidy final chapter here, because the catalog deal alone guarantees new developments for years to come, tied to songs written back when she was still building her name as a solo artist for the very first time. Let's take one more look at the overall shape of this empire before wrapping up, because after 5 parts covering publishing, fashion, real estate, and institutional recognition, the through line running underneath all of it deserves to be stated plainly one final time. Every dollar traced through this story connects back to a decision to own something, a label, a publishing stake, a co-branded product line, rather than simply getting paid a fee and walking away. That single pattern, repeated across 3 decades and dozens of individual deals, is what turned a songwriter from Portsmouth, Virginia, into the center of an active, ongoing, multi-industry business empire. It's a pattern that predates most of the current conversation around artists reclaiming their masters and demanding ownership stakes in their own work. Elliott was doing it quietly back in 1997, years before that conversation became a mainstream industry talk point. So where does that leave the number everyone keeps citing? $50 million. Based on everything documented across public sources, real estate records, brand deal reporting, and Hall of Fame recognition, that figure holds up as a solid, well-supported estimate of where her wealth currently stands. But given the active publishing acquisition still unfolding, the streaming numbers still climbing on new songs built off her old catalog, and the continued brand relationships still generating fresh campaigns, that number looks less like a ceiling and more like a current snapshot of a business that's still very much in motion. Whatever the true figure turns out to be once every private deal term eventually surfaces, the pattern behind it is fully documented and clear. Decades of ownership decisions, stacked one on top of another, turning a songwriting career into a genuine, diversified empire. And that's really the story here. Not a single lucky break, Not one blockbuster deal, but 3 decades of a songwriter and label owner from Virginia, consistently choosing ownership over a quick check, over and over again, until those choices added up to a label, a publishing stake worth enough to anchor a brand new company, multiple real estate holdings, a 2-decade sneaker partnership, and a permanent seat in 3 of music's most exclusive halls of fame. The songs keep getting sampled, the catalog keeps getting licensed, the brand deals keep getting renewed. And somewhere in the middle of all of it sits a woman who started out writing songs for other people in the early 90s, decided fairly early on that she wasn't going to just be handed a paycheck for her work, and built an empire instead. That's what's actually inside Missy Elliott's $50 million empire. Not a single vault of cash, but a web of ownership stakes, decades deep, still generating new headlines today.